Hello everyone, this is Vishal Jagtap from Bitcode Technologies, and today we'll talk about declaration and definition of variables in C. A lot of times we get confused what is declaration of a variable and what is definition of a variable. So let's clear this. I'm going to declare a variable integer I. So when I do this, I'm informing the compiler, I'm telling the compiler that I'm going to use a variable I which will be containing integer type of data. So this is the declaration of variable I, and when I actually store some meaningful data, when I store some meaningful value into this variable I, let's say 100, now this is the definition of the variable, right? So this is declaration and this is definition, right? So definition means you assign something meaningful, you put something meaningful into a variable. Declaration is informing the compiler what you want, what kind of variable you want to be created. Okay, now you can combine this declaration and definition in a single line also. For an example, I will say character ch is equals to uppercase A. Now in this case, I have clubbed the declaration and definition together. So using this syntax, I'm informing the compiler that ch is a variable which is going to store character type of data, and I have defined the variable ch to contain a, right? I've assigned some meaningful value a to ch, right? Okay. Now this declaration, whenever you're declaring the variables, the declaration is processed by the compiler at compile time when you're actually compiling the code. However, the definition, that is storing some meaningful value into a variable, that is going to take place at runtime. Obviously, because in this case the character ch and the character I, sorry, integer I will be allocated memory when you run the program, and when the ch and I are having physical existence in memory, then and only then you can store some data into those variables. So declaration is checked or is processed or is taken in consideration at compile time. The definition, that is ch is equals to a or I is equals to 100, this is going to happen at runtime. I got one more example to clarify or to make it a little more clear how this declaration definition works. Okay, so I'll just make some changes. I'll delete this. I will declare this integer variable I to contain 100. Okay, so I'm doing this declaration and definition using a single expression. Then I'm writing a switch case, so I'm having switch 1. I'm having only one case. I'm going to have only one case, and that's it, right? So before I do anything, at the beginning of this switch block, I'm going to declare integer j is equals to 200, and then inside this case 1, I'm simply going to print the value of I and j, like that. Okay, now as you can see, the errors are gone. Fine. Now the thing is that it looks very simple. Like I is declared and it is initialized with j, sorry, 100. J is declared and it is initialized with 200. Everything looks fine. Yes, it is. But you can see over here. So when I'm printing this value of I and j, so we are expecting I to print 100, and in place of j we are expecting it to print 200, isn't it? Let's try to run it. Let's see what happens. So you're not going to get 100 and 200. You can see the results over here. I'll zoom in the screen. So you can see yes, that 100 is what we're getting. However, we are not getting the value of j as 200, which we might have been expecting. What is exactly happening over here? Let's have a look. Now in this example, you can see this integer I, which is declaration part, is processed by compiler at compile time. So at compile time, compiler will make a note that it has to create a variable I which is supposed to hold integer type of data. Same thing happens with integer j. This is a valid declaration. You can always declare variables or functions or structures at the beginning of a block, right? So in this case, I'm declaring integer j at the beginning of a switch block, which is a valid declaration. Okay, so in this case, this integer I and integer j, these declarations, they are uh, processed by compiler. They have been taken note by compiler at compile time. So compiler is aware that when your program starts running, it has to allocate memory to variable I, and it has to allocate memory to the integer variable, that is j. However, as we discussed a little earlier, that definition, assigning some meaningful value to the variable, storing some meaningful information into the variable, that happens at runtime. Okay, so when you start running the program, compiler is already aware that it has to allocate memory to I and it has to allocate memory to j, which it will do, and then it will continue with the definition of variable I. So I will be initialized with 100. Okay, then it will go to the next statement, which is a switch statement, and we are saying over here switch 1. So when you say switch 1, the control will be transferred to the case 1. Okay, and you can see this definition of this variable, that j is equals to 200. The definition of the variable j has been skipped, and that's why j is containing its default value, that is 0. If you're running this program on Windows or Linux, you might get garbage value for j. I'm using Macintosh, where the initial values are generally 0. Anyway, so j is equals to 200. This definition has been skipped, okay, because when I say switch 1, control will directly be transferred to case 1, and inside this case 1, when I print I is equals to percentage %d, j is equals to percentage %d, ij, so for I it will print 100 because I is defined. However, j's definition has been skipped, so it will be printing some garbage values on whatever based on your platform. In this case, it is 0, right? So with this example, you can clearly understand what is the difference between declaration and definition of a variable. Now you can keep on defining the variable a lot of times. Okay, for an example, after the switch, I can say I is equals to 200. So here I'm redefining the variable I to hold 200, which is absolutely okay. However, within the same scope, I cannot declare the variable again. So we can redefine a variable, but it's very obvious we cannot redeclare a variable. I hope this example has cleared your doubt about declaration of a variable and definition of a variable. So that's all from me. See you in the next session. Meanwhile, happy learning.